As early as 1845, the first settlers on Puget Sound recognized the beauty of this site, where the Deschutes River has one last fling over rapids and falls before it comes to an end in Capitol Lake, here at Tumwater, Washington, just south of the state capitol at Olympia. In 1896, only 7 years after Washington became a state, the Olympia Brewing Company was founded here. In those days, coastal traders navigated to the southern tip of Puget Sound and right up to the brewery dock. Olympia's old brew house still stands, but nearly everything around it has greatly changed. A few hundred yards upstream, the Deschutes River cascades over Tumwater Falls as it always has, but this pleasant sight and sound is now in Tumwater Falls Park. The park was a gift from the brewery to the Olympia Tumwater Foundation in 1962. Establishing Tumwater Falls Park was the first step in the development of an area dedicated to public recreation, where people of all ages can enjoy the falls, the river, and the landscape, or watch the salmon as they climb the ladders to reach their spawning grounds. Today, the beautifully developed green belt along the river lies between the modern brewery and Interstate Highway 5. And the freeway brings about 250,000 a year tourists from all parts of the United States and nearly every other corner of the globe. Upriver from the brewery and Tumwater Falls Park, a 260-acre parcel of land looked about like this in early 1968. That is, until the middle of May in that year. The land had been occupied for many years by Olympia's field of artesian wells, but that was all. However, dual land use had been under serious consideration for about 15 years. Intensive land use studies were commissioned in 1967. Olympia's own long-range planning teams worked with the professional consultants. Finally, on May 16, 1968, the Olympia Brewing Company began development of a $2,600,000 recreation complex. Tumwater Valley Development Company, a wholly owned subsidiary, was formed in June 1968. Through the years, all studies had shown a definite need for additional recreational facilities in this area. Olympia stipulated that all facilities would be public, and the company would continue to make the river available to fishermen. Clearing brush and trees from the site was the first job. Although many trees were saved, others had to be removed for the golf course layout, or simply because they could not survive when the land was raised to a new level. The big clearing job went on for months. Early in the project, 20,000 cubic yards of red basalt were hauled in to rip-rap the banks of the river and keep the channel in bounds. The banks are cut on an angle, so the deeper the water, the wider the channel, thus containing winter surges on the Deschutes. One problem had to be recognized from the start. The land here was very low and subject to flooding in winter. The bog of yesterday had to be filled, raising the land above the flood level. To accomplish that, 2 million cubic yards of sand were spread over the surface of the site. Golf course architects and soil experts alike endorse a sand surface because of the excellent drainage it provides. But even sand needs some relief from the winter rains and the natural springs that flourish here. To make sure the course is dry, 5 miles of large galvanized drainage pipe is installed beneath the surface. The crew now checks the fall on one drainage line. The drainage pipes weave patterns throughout the golf course and run from catch basins down to the river. More about those catch basins later. Since hip boots are not considered normal wear for golfers, this will give you some idea of why drainage was an important consideration in construction of the Tumwater Valley course. Sand for the tremendous fill job had to be hauled across the river. So another early job is building a bridge across the Deschutes. Less than a month after groundbreaking, the fastest available crews were put to work, driving piles, pouring concrete, and assembling members for the bridge. And soon they had a good, sound bridge to support the weight of giant earth pulls hauling 40 cubic yards of sand. But it appears that this frolicking dog would rather cross the river in its own old-fashioned way. Earth, in this case sand, was moved to the west side of the river from a pure sand hill on company property. Huge earth-moving buckets were loaded by a high-speed conveyor. 3 Caterpillar tractors stoked the conveyor. The conveyor can fill 2 of these tractor-drawn buckets in 55 seconds. That means 40 cubic yards of earth loaded in less than a minute. Even so, raising the floor of the valley an average of 5 feet is a large order. It took 100,000 bucket loads of sand to complete the fill. The work went on for over a year. As one national magazine put it, this part of the project, the earth fill job, involved moving a mountain. Well, you're always bound to find some incorrigible golfers, and they're the worst kind. At the 18th tee, about a year and a half ahead of time. Before the end of August in 1968, the riverbanks had been seeded with tall alta fescue, a heavy-rooted grass picked to hold the soil and control erosion. This planting couldn't wait for the irrigation system, so for 65 days, the riverbanks were watered by tank truck. With the basic fill work completed, the Tumwater Valley golf course looked about like this, already a far cry from the rainforest appearance of less than a year before. But there's still a lot of finish grading that lies ahead. In the fall of 1968, construction began on 4 small lakes, one located near the future site of the pro shop in what used to be a swampy area. At this early stage of the game, not too much indication of the placid water and landscape scene that are planned for the future, but that will come in due time. The other lakes are on the golf course proper, adding interest and challenge to the play. Here on the 5th hole, the final contour is set for another lake. Besides the golfing hazard and natural beauty, these lakes also serve a practical purpose. They are catch basins deliberately placed in the wetter spots. With drainage pipes, sand, and catch basins all set to keep the course dry, now it's necessary to install another system to keep it wet. There was absolutely no compromise in specifications set for the irrigation system. The directive? Make Tumwater Valley as dry and as green as an all-year-round course can be. After mechanical ditch diggers had finished the rough job, what the men called the molehill crew moved in for the finish work. This will give you some idea of the tremendous network of irrigation lines that lie under the Tumwater course. Altogether, 39 miles of irrigation pipe. Now a joint is sealed on the main line. Swing joints are installed at outlets where sprinkler heads will finally go, but at this stage, the pipes are only capped. These caps will remain in place through final floating of the soil surface. A 1/4-inch hole in each cap is covered with masking tape to keep out the dirt. After the basic fill and the man-made contours of the course were completed, there still remained many weeks of work in final shaping of tees and greens, fine grading of the entire course, and preparing the soil for planting, or what the experts called fine floating. On the fairways, a rake eliminates the few surface rocks that came from the sand hill. Then the surface is dragged, preparing the seedbed for planting. On September 12, 1968, another artesian well is brought in to supply water for irrigating the golf course. During the summer months, they'll need 1 to 1.5 million gallons of water a day, a large order. The well, 315 feet deep, comes in with a 6.5-inch natural flow through the 12-inch casing of the surface. Water free flows at 1,200 gallons per minute. To illustrate the natural artesian pressure, all these sprinklers are operating without any assistance from a pump. Of course, a pump certainly is required to meet the demands of the whole system. To carry power to the pump and the maintenance shop, a 15,000-volt underground cable runs through the course. Actually, this cable is made up of 2 big power lines and 10 signal wires for communications and sprinkler controls. Before the amazingly complex irrigation system is complete, another electrical conduit is hung on the side of a bridge near the 13th tee. There are 19 additional control wires in this conduit, making a total of 29. How did they find the sprinkler locations after fine grading was completed? Easy. Just turn on the water. Water blows off the protective tape, shoots up through the holes in the caps, and now you know where the sprinklers go. The temporary caps are removed and the sprinkler heads installed. On the Tumwater course, there are 2,000 sprinkler heads. That's more than 3 times as many as found on the average golf course. To avoid washing out the soil and seed that's close to the sprinklers, the heads are at first installed 4 inches above the surface. But after the grass gets a good start, they're lowered flush with the ground. As work on the soil surface, smoothing and fine floating, is completed, the fairways are made ready for planting. 153 tons of lime and 88 tons of fertilizer are spread over the entire course. Seeding requires 9 tons of fairway mix. The greens, of course, require special treatment. An additional mile of drainage tile is placed beneath the surface and the soil tamped in. The greens are finally formed almost by hand. Topsoil for the greens is a mixture of sand and sawdust, 20% sawdust. Trucks that carry the mix are not allowed on the green, but dump their loads at the edge. Rocks are picked out by hand. Lightweight equipment is used for the fine floating. The choice of grass for the greens is Toronto bent, planted not by seed, but by stolons. Actual stems of grass are scattered about on the carefully prepared surface. This highly regarded putting grass was not available in the Pacific Northwest till 1969. It can be planted only by the stolonizing method. Roots sprout at the stem joints and establish the new grass. The stolons are covered lightly with a top dressing of sifted sand. Then the surface is rolled to burn the stolons into the soil. Fairway seeding continued through the summer of '69. This is the first mowing on one fairway. With sprinkler heads still raised, the mower has to go around or jump over them. To remove any bumps that may have developed in the fairway, the turf is now rolled in both directions. Meanwhile, other construction is in progress. In the spring of 1969, work begins on the swimming pools. They will be completed in 6.5 months. In keeping with the Northwest theme, the building features extensive use of wood, such as these huge laminated beams. Opened to the public in mid-October 1969, this was the first operating facility in the Tumwater Valley project. Although the pools were designed primarily for recreational swimming, a number of schools now bring students here for physical education classes. The diving and beginners instructional pool is 60 feet long and 20 feet wide, 2.5 feet deep in the instructional half, 12 feet deep in the diving half. The other pool is standard competitive length, 75 feet and 1 inch. 42 feet wide, it divides into 6 lanes, 3 feet deep at the ends, 5.5 feet deep in the center. The permanent spectators gallery seats 200 people. On weekends during the school year, competitive events are often held here. This, a Southwestern Washington District High School meet for girls. When we say the instructional pool is used by public swimming classes for all age groups, we mean all age groups. These water babies are 9 months to 2 years old. About 7 months after the swimming pool was opened, ground was broken for the pro shop and restaurant. That was less than 2 months before the scheduled opening of the golf course, and this construction moved along at a fast clip. At the same time, they are putting the final topping on 4 tennis courts. Below this surface, 12 inches of gravel and 6 of crushed rock, compacted with a highway-type vibrator compactor. 2 layers of asphalt and 8 coats of topping. By midsummer of 1970, the entire complex at Tumwater Valley is ready for the public. Visitors enter the public recreation area from Capitol Boulevard on a new road that curves down the hill to the tennis courts, the swimming pool, and the pro shop and restaurant. 1,000 square feet of floor space inside is unobstructed, except for decorative grills and movable partitions. The floor is fully covered with spike-proof carpeting, welcoming the golfer to both pro shop and the restaurant, for coffee after the first 9 or for a full-course meal. The restaurant seats 135 people in year-round air-conditioned comfort. The space can be divided into banquet facilities, is available to the public for group meetings and social functions. The excellent food service, morning, noon, and night, is outstanding. What's that about all work and no play? The driving range at Tumwater Valley has the capacity for more than 100 people. There's over an acre of turf in the tee area alone. This is Tumwater Valley Golf Club, a par 72 course that is easily one of the most interesting in the West. In 14 of the 18 holes, play on the course involves water in stream, river, or lake. It might be more accurate to say 20 holes instead of 18, since both 8 and 11 offer 2 tees, 2 fairways, and 2 greens. Players may take their choice. Take a closer look. 8 east from the championship tee is 165 yards long. 8 west is 55 yards longer at 220 yards. Also, the water hazard on 8 east is comparatively minor. On 8 west, there's a great deal more water lying in wait for the unwary ball. So men, women, and champions can all play the course in either a long or a short form. In short form, the course is 5,883 yards for women, with 45 additional yards in the long form. From the men's tees, the course plays 6,320 yards in short form, with 72 additional yards in the long form. For championship play, the course can be extended to slightly more than 7,100 yards. Regular tees present a challenge to the average player. The championship layout, both in location of tees and distance, challenges even the most skillful player. In 220 maintained acres of the Tumwater course, there are 144 acres of fairways, not to mention the driving range. No matter how you play it, it's a good, healthy course. Playing 18 holes with no zigzags at all means walking 5 miles. A well-maintained course like Tumwater Valley encourages the replacement of divots and the repair of ball marks on the greens. This grass will live and breathe again. But there are always some who don't repair the damage, and every day maintenance crews try to save all the grass they can. But some spots were dead before the sun went down yesterday. The maintenance shop at Tumwater Valley is located at the geographical center of the golf course. In this same area are the artesian well and pump house and 10 acres of land for the club's own nursery. The extensive planting program is still underway. Besides the hundreds of native trees that were saved in the land clearing operation, more than 3,000 other trees will be added to the landscape. Maintenance of the Tumwater course requires a full-time, year-round crew of at least 5 men, and a dozen or more in summertime. In the growing season, greens are mowed every day, and they get a double brushing once a week. Brushes ahead of the mowing reels straighten up the grass. The mowers make 2 passes in opposite directions. The mower on the right is now making a second cut on the swath that was just cut in the other direction. Then the greens are whipped to break up any remaining lumps of grass. Another daily chore of maintenance, moving the cups on the greens. The greenskeeper is careful to match the grain of the grass when a fresh plug goes into yesterday's hole. The sand that was moved in to raise the valley floor is now kept intact by grass roots that reach down about 2 feet and form a binding network around the soil. Like every living thing, the grass requires regular food and water. And Tumwater Valley has one of the most elaborate irrigation systems in the country. The system is controlled by a network of 488 electrically activated valves. 123 miles of underground wire connect these valves with a central control station. The entire system can be programmed by the calendar and by the clock, so that sprinklers go through preset cycles automatically. For example, at the end of, say, 10 minutes, the timer moves to the second valve. Now, watch the sprinklers in the background cut out. Besides controlling regular watering cycles, which can be changed to fit the weather, a separate set of controls provides short syringe cycles to take the dew off the greens in the morning or sweep away the frost after the temperature rises above 32 degrees. On the right, in the field module, there's an entirely separate control system which can bypass the automatic system. These controls are used to water in fertilizer promptly and avoid burning. That is, all sprinklers at once instead of cycling in one valve at a time. So it takes a lot of doing to build and maintain a championship quality golf course. Of course, that's not all there is at Tumwater Valley. In addition to all the new facilities, the old attractions aren't forgotten. In keeping with the aims of the State Game Department, access to the river is still provided for fishing. This might be the only course in the country where a hook can mean trouble for either golfers or fish. In 1968, when the land looked like this, Olympia set out to build a new public facility for year-round play. Two years later, the Tumwater Valley Development Company had made this long-planned development an exciting reality, here now for the public to enjoy.